Good afternoon, morning, evening for everybody, wherever you are when you are watching this conversation with Rebecca and myself. Rebecca has a very powerful story to share, and she's sharing her story from, is it a company that you have? Is it just the title of your story, Recovery from Within? Can you tell me a little bit more about that, please?
Well, Recovery from Within is the name of our book that my daughter and I wrote, which came to us because that's kind of what had happened when she saw something completely different, which ended her struggle, her suffering. Mm-hmm. So, shall I start at the beginning?
Please do. Please do.
So my name's Rebecca, and gosh, how many years ago? 10 years ago now, my daughter Bea, 12 years ago now, my daughter Bea, who was 14 at the time, was diagnosed with anorexia. And it was like a grenade with a pin out had been thrown into our family, as you can imagine. I'd had my anxieties before, not wanting to face it. I knew something was wrong. I'd kind of been secretly researching on Google and just had such a sick feeling in my stomach that I just couldn't go there. So I shelved it and pretended that it wasn't happening. At the time, I was trained to be a coach. I'm NLP and coaching, that's kind of was my background. So it was incredibly helpful for me in, as she was diagnosed, and as then it was like the wheels came off our lives. It was like being given a label, as Bea will say. She wanted to become the best anorexic she could. And we just floundered around for a couple of years. I was fortunate that, as I said, I was going through my coaching training, so I was able to kind of frankly, the main thing for me was to see that this wasn't who she was. It was something that she was going through. So back in NLP days, it wasn't her identity, it was behavior. And that was very helpful for me because at this point I hadn't it was only in the last 3 years that I came across the understanding of the three principles, that kind of everything then slotted in and made sense. But at the time, we were just floundering, seeing therapists, counsellors, psychiatrists, psychologists, nutritionists, dietitians, all of this. And it put enormous strain on the family as well. So we managed that for a couple of years, and then Bea's weight came up to an acceptable level because that's how they measure it. And of course, her mind was still fried. She went off to university, and it was always there in the background that it was something that she would always have to deal with. A bit kind of like people think around alcoholism, that it's kind of always there. And an awful lot had happened during that time. I'd got divorced. I had one of my sons leaving home for university. I had all sorts of, my youngest was losing the plot at school. Where's my sister? I want my sister back. So I was dealing with an awful lot at the time and not sure how well I was doing. But we just got through it all. And then 3 years ago, so in fact, before then, anorexia was always there in the wings, is what I felt. It wasn't ever something I felt I could broach with. So if we were wanting to go out for a meal, I would need to tell Bea where we were going so she could look up and see the menu and etc. And that was just kind of the way we worked. And if she was coming home for the weekend, I would be thinking, oh, no, I better not do that. Can't really do that. She doesn't eat that. Da-da-da. So it was always there, but it's kind of, you get used to living like that. And it's only when you see something different that you go, wow, were we really doing that? So 3 years ago, just under 3 years ago, I came across this Inside Out understanding. And it had a profound impact on my life. And interestingly, one of the things that I thought it would help Bea with was anxiety that she had. Really quite paralyzing anxiety at times. And it started to have an impact. But for me, it was almost like, yeah, but it's not going to help eating disorder. I still daren't even broach it with her. So we had a conversation with a friend of mine, Mary, who works with eating disorders. She's a drama therapist. She works from this understanding, and she works in the NHS up in Yorkshire. And we were on a call just like this, a Zoom call, and Mary wanted to just get some idea because, you know, Bea was recovering, but well-ish, and Bea was talking to Mary about her blacklist. Yeah, it's fine, you know, I just got these foods that I just don't eat, and it's fine though, I just, you know, certain things, blah, blah, blah. And Mary said to her, Bea, you do know that's made up, don't you? And the look on Bea's face, I knew she'd seen something. And it was like, you know when you line up a whole load of dominoes and you tip one and you go, and it goes, and that's what happened. I've got goosebumps. And that's what happened in a very short space of time. Everything shifted for her. And I still get emotional at the complete and utter shift. And Bea went, as she said, from in recovery to recovered.
I've got goosebumps. That's fantastic.
So she went from being in recovery to recovered. And she would send me texts saying things like, who knew smoked salmon and cream cheese sandwiches tasted so good? And she would go to any restaurant and she would say she would not look at the salad section anymore. She would look at what she wanted to eat. And the shift was so profound that within a short space of time, we talked about writing a book years ago, but it just wasn't the right time, because every time we started broaching the subject back then, she would start to get feelings. And what happened as a result, of this insight that she had, she said to me, Mum, it's time, let's write the book. So what we've done in our book, which we called Recovery from Within, A Mother and Daughter's Journey Through Anorexia, was what it was like before for her and for me, and then what it was like afterwards. And we've written it from her perspective as somebody who was struggling, and also I've written it from my perspective as a carer, I guess. So that's where we are.
And I'm guessing now you're no longer her carer, you're back to her mum.
I'm mum. And we were close anyway, but this has just shifted things completely. And we share from her perspective and from my perspective, lots of kind of little mini chapters so that it's easily digestible and easy to read. And we've had some wonderful feedback from parents saying, I've now got an insight and glimpse into what it was like for my son or daughter, or is for my son or daughter, or my loved one. And I've had emails from young people who've said, thank you, I'm now able to see what it's like for mum or dad. Bea and I recently spoke at Swansea University for one of the medic kind of, they were doing something on mental illnesses, and eating disorders was one of their things. So we spoke, and at the end, one of the students came up to me I don't know whether I can say this without crying. And she just looked at me and she said, I'm going back home to my flat to phone my mum, because I had no idea what she'd gone through in this as well. And the love and compassion that we can have for each other when we understand where our feelings are really coming from and the nature of all of this.
Yeah, something like you said, that's all of it is so important, but something that quite often when parents and their children are struggling or going through this is each one's wrapped up in their own thoughts storm,
yeah,
and thinks they know what the other one's going through, quite often, but in reality they have no idea.
yeah.
So I'm sure that the value in the book, which I'm going to have to get now because I haven't got it yet, but we'll be buying that after this call, I guarantee. I'll probably be voting the left of it after that. But the insights, as you say, without any guilt, without any judgment, without just laying it out as it was, and then how it is, that's going to give hope to so many, from parents and children's sides throughout. That's this understanding we know is so, can be so life-changing. We know that, we say it all the time, and we get used to saying that. We get used to that, and it's only when we hear stories such as yours that it brings it back to just how much unnecessary suffering goes on, all innocently, all people trying to do their best.
Yeah.
And as you say, taking on a label, and I'm going to be the best one of those I can be. And I'm a little bit blown away. Thank you very much for that. So is there anything that, if there's a parent listening to this conversation now, and they maybe were like you before they had the diagnosis, that not really wanting to go there because it's much too scary to even contemplate as truth, what would you say to those parents in that situation?
I think one of the most important things that I could do for Bea was to love unconditionally, without agenda. And actually, as parents, we kind of think that's what we do anyway. But this is, and I think the thing that's tied up in that as well is to listen. So we're listening from a place of unconditional love. Wow. I hadn't, those are two of my big things in this, but actually to bring those together, to listen from a place of unconditional love, which means that we are not waiting to talk. We're not jumping in what you need to do because we're frightened.
Yeah.
As a parent with a child that's not eating or overeating and binging or self-harming or even, caught up in the most horrendous and debilitating anxiety, we want to make it better. But a plaster or Calpol or paracetamol isn't going to do this. And that's what we want to do. We want to hold them and make it better. But the best thing we can do is to deeply listen. Because to be listened to is one of the greatest gifts we can give somebody. Because we know what it's like when somebody's listening to us. rather than tuned out and just going, yeah, 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 yeah. It's to listen, because when we're listened to, when we feel heard, something kind of happens, and we then begin to listen to somebody else as well. And to do it from a place of unconditional love, which means I will love you whatever you choose to do. And I remember that conversation with Bea when she was really ill. You know, I can't make you better. And I love you with all my heart. And that kind of somehow gives a safety net until they can see their own safety net. You know, so this was all pre-principles understanding, but I was being clearly guided by something to say things like that. And I think the other important thing, so we've got listening and unconditional love. The really important thing is to see their health. See what's beneath the eating disorder. See that they don't need fixing, which might seem unbelievably crass of me to say when you've got a child that's... But underneath that, this is just like the biggest thought storm out there. And it's seeing that it's not them. They aren't that. We're not that. In our own thought storm that we're caught up in as a parent or a carer, with all the judgments that we've got about ourselves in all of that, and the shame and the, you know, fear and all of that. And to see that whatever they're going through, it's not who they are. And if we can focus or get a glimpse of that, that the moment that you're caught, that you're out walking the dog or laughing at some TV program or, I don't know, whatever it is, they're not ill in that moment. And it's just when they're, you know, I always keep, I don't know if this will go out as a Zoom or an audio, but I've got something I want to show you.
It's a Zoom.
So I have this with me all the time, which is so I live right by the sea, so I've got some water here and sand in the bottom of it. And that's our natural clarity, our natural state of well-being, all of us. And when we've got an eating disorder or anxiety or anything, that's what's going on all the time. We don't even know we're doing it. We don't even know we're doing it. And when we put it down, really quickly, look how quickly that's settled. And it's from that place that we see things in a completely different way, whether as a parent, a carer, or somebody with an eating disorder. And yeah, you know, I use this with the young people I'm working with eating disorders. You know, and it's always there when we're sitting on my sofa chatting, and then they start talking, and I just pick it up and start doing this, and they just start laughing. And when they start laughing, that's where they are again. And as a carer, if we can see our own well-being, then we can see it in someone else. And our resilience. And their resilience. And then we forget, and we get caught up again, and we're frightened, and we're crying, and that's the journey.
I think with resilience, we don't see ourselves going through day to day, week, month, year. We feel like we're not coping, that we're not resilient, that we're not doing things, and yet when we look back at how long and how resilient we actually have been. And something you said that really stuck with me as I was listening to you, and that was, we can't fix our children. Now, as a parent, that's what we, with a 3-parent understanding, we know that our children never need fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And from a human perspective, from a mum or a parent or a loved one, if somebody that's suffering perspective, to actually take our hands off the wheel,
yeah,
and say, we love you so much. We can't fix you, but we love you no matter what. That's probably one of the strongest, most powerful, and most scary things for a parent to actually do. Yeah. And yet it's exactly what's often the most powerful thing that will help your child.
Yeah. Because it's kind of helping them see their own life in a way. And gives them hope.
Which is precisely what I think your book does to for a lot of people.
Mm.
And I think I can almost hear, or I can imagine that there'll be parents listening to this video, watching this recording, going, yes, but it's not this, but we've tried this. And yet still always totally innocently, purely with love and through love, watching through the there's something wrong with you lens. There must be something wrong with you. There must be something I've not done, or I've done wrong, or there must be something there must be something wrong with you. How can they see that? As you said in the beginning, okay, you could see how this could help me from the anxiety.
Yes.
And something I often say to people is, we all have our yes, but not they spots. And quite often it's with parenting. We can see it in all aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
But the exception and the rule is the parenting. We often say that. We all have that, but there really are no exceptions. When we stop looking at our children, which is really difficult, because we're so used to trying to fix and trying innocently to help, and that precisely sometimes can be what keeps them in that place.
Yeah.
By keeping that label there, by releasing, like I say, I take the hands off the steering wheel. That's my main metaphor. We haven't got the control of where it's going anyway. Take the hands off it and trust.
Yes, and I love that metaphor, because one that I often use as well is that when we as the parents are trying to fix and sort, and it's like we're gripping so tightly in thick fog and rain and wind, driving down the motorway, which is what happened to me in January sometime. Terrifying, okay? And the natural instinct for me is to slow down, okay? There were people bombing past. So when we slow down, because there are no exceptions in this understanding, when we slow down, which feels utterly counterintuitive at times, no, I need to read another book. No, I need to speak to another. No, I need to do this. I need to, try this food, or do that, or have that conversation. It's just, which feels, because we're in a state of high anxiety ourselves, because we don't want them to die. If that's the bottom line, that's the greatest fear. It's just when we slow down, that's when wisdom speaks. An example of this for me, when Bea was ill. So before this understanding, again, it's working whether we know it or not, was that we were having a horrendous argument in the kitchen, just really awful. She was so angry with me about something, and I just knew to not engage. I just knew that I needed some space, and I said, I can't, I need to get out. I need to go upstairs to my room for a minute, because I can't trust that what comes out of my mouth next will be helpful. No, I went upstairs anyway, shut the door. I don't even know what I did up there. And I came down maybe 15 minutes later to a big hug. So we know what to do when we're not just mesmerized by the thinking that's all consuming at times, from a place of fear.
Recovery can only ever come from within. It can never come from anywhere else.
Mm. Yeah.
And that can be really hard. Mm. For somebody who loves the person who is suffering. You don't need me to tell you. I'm just talking for the people who are listening as well. But goodness, yeah, just until it makes sense through their own eyes,
yeah,
nothing's going to be sustainable.
Mm.
As you say, it'll always be in the background. Otherwise, you would be putting her designated weight on, but it was always there in your mind and possibly in hers, probably in hers, checking menus, etc., etc. Until it wasn't.
Yeah. And I think the thing to know as well is that this isn't about never having thinking about food again, but it's just that it's not so attractive to pursue it, you know?
It's like having
and same for me. There are moments that I might have well, why didn't she have an extra portion, you know? And you know, I could let myself go off down that path. It's like, oh no, that's just my thinking.
So useful. That our thinking is so alluring, isn't it?
Yes, isn't it?
We just fall, as if we're guided gently into that reality. Not until we open our eyes and we're in the Wizard of Oz and we're in the house that's spinning around and dragging everything else in. That, oh, how did we get here? Because it can happen so quickly.
The Wizard of Oz has got some wonderful metaphors.
I love the house.
Oz is the perfect metaphor. Yes. Big, booming, all-powerful Oz, and he's this little bloke, you know, behind a curtain.
Therein is our thoughts.
Exactly. Made of nothing. But boy, are they real in the moment when they look it. Yeah, it is. It's like that the spinning, isn't it, in the house?
Dragging everything else in, all of the fences and when you're in the middle of that, you can't comprehend that there's anything out of it because it seems like everything's being dragged into it. And yet there's a full world outside of it.
Mm-hmm. One of the chapters Bea's written in the book is "Who am I?" or words to the effect of "Who am I without my eating disorder?"
Yeah.
All the things that she can be and is. And you could, you know, change that to be, who am I if, you know, if not caring or not a carer? Yeah. Who else are we?
And that's another important point, is we can take on that identity as well.
Oh yes. Yeah. And everything that went along with that, the shame was a big one, because what was it saying about me as a parent?
What are people thinking?
Yes.
They must be thinking that it's, yeah. That big Oz can really make.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's all made up.
Yeah. But we don't see it like that until we see it.
Yeah. Until everybody sees it for themselves. We've just got to love unconditionally, without thinking, well, if I give them a hug, they'll have that piece of whatever for me, or if we go to this nice place, they'll have this. It's taking the back burning agenda, just letting it go. As long as there's a back burning agenda, no matter how well-being it is, no matter how good the intention is or loving it is, just has to not be there, really, doesn't it? And
I get how hard that is.
It's like walking a trapeze with no safety net, yet there's an even bigger safety net underneath. If that makes sense, it can feel as though there's no safety net, and that's pretty scary. Yet the safety net's always there. Once we trust.
Do you know what's just come to my mind is, so I've got Bea's my middle one. I've got two boys either side. And when I was teaching my youngest son, who's now 20, to cycle, so he had his stabilizers on, and we'd be up and down the road, up and down, up and down, up and down the road. And, you know, he was ready, he could do it. He was ready to take the stabilizers off. So we had the stabilizers off, but it was, you know, I would hold the back of the saddle. Did my back in doing it, that awful bent over, you know.
Been there, done that, yes.
And I would pretend to hold the back of the saddle, and he was off. But the minute he knew I wasn't holding it, he was, ah! But I said, but I'm not holding it. I haven't been holding it. You're fine. So in a way, it's the stabilizers keep them insecure.
Yeah.
I can't do this. Oh, but you can.
I love that.
It's just come to me now.
Really love that.
Yeah.
And every parent who's ever taught a child to ride a bike knows that they have to take the stabilizers off sometime. I don't see many teenagers riding around with stabilizers on their heads. So we can take the stabilizers off. We can let go of that saddle. We've all done it at one stage or another when we trust ourselves. And then the interesting thing with that is when we are telling ourselves that they're not ready, we keep them wobbling because we shake our heads without realizing when we've got a hold of the back of the bike. I know I've done that.
Or the first time you let them go on the bus to school, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, it's, yeah. And there's no judgment in that. It's just, it's a natural thing because we love them so much.
Yeah. And then there was that saying, if you love them, let them fly.
Yeah.
And our job is to teach them to fly.
One of my kind of phrases throughout my parenting has always been to give my children roots and wings.
Yeah.
Bea's actually had it tattooed on.
Oh, lovely. She
said, you can't be cross, Mum, because it's your words.
You can't really, can you?
But it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
And seeing them fly can feel really painful to begin with, but that's all we want.
And that's once again ours telling us, isn't it? Well, I would absolutely love to speak to Bea as well if she has time and is up for that, sharing her story to help other people as well. That would be brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not often speechless. It's not often I don't, and I just had goosebumps and no words. Thank you so much. I will put the link to your book.
Lovely, thank you.
With this recording on YouTube, and I will be sharing it everywhere, and I'll share it with you as well. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to leave either the person going through anxiety, or anxiety, self-harming, eating disorders, whatever it is, anyone going through something that they're struggling, either the person that's going through it or the person that's loving a person going through it? Is there anything you'd like to leave in this conversation with?
I think that the thing that comes to mind is you are so resilient, beyond anything you think is possible right now. And recovery is there. It's there, not just to be in recovery, but recovered. And that's so important to know.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording.